talking about just that. Anyhow,
Yeah.
Kristen can. She just read me half the thing because I
Oh,
didn't get a chance
is
to
that
do it.
right?
Yeah,
Nice.
so
Nice.
it's a
Yeah,
better.
actually,
I like
I
doing
had
it
to
that way.
I had to start reading like just the parts that I had like bracketed and underlined because we were like short on time, which is really interesting because it's
yeah.
just like truncating and you could kind of like jump through it like that.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
don't know.
It seems like he almost like I don't know, like I get this perspective a little bit that he starts like here and he goes all the way down and then like back. Like that's kind of what it
Hmm.
like looks like to me. And I think in a few points it's like this like jagged thing and then he goes like all the way back because it starts with what like the concept of nearness and then nearness leading into thingness and then like
Yeah.
I got lost kind of after like thingness.
Yeah. There's
And
like 14 steps of abstraction past that. Yeah.
yeah. Also, I don't know. Okay, maybe this is going too deep too fast. But I also, are you familiar with like the German tradition of this like the four things that are like interconnected? Like I didn't quite get
Fourfold
that.
No.
oneness. Yeah.
Yeah, four towards oneness. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it outside of this piece.
Yeah. Like no cultural memory of this at all for me. Like, other than like the sort of air, wind, water, fire thing,
Yeah.
like,
Mm,
or earth, but that comes more from like an Eastern tradition, I think, like
I
than
see.
any like sort of mythology or anything. So yeah, I didn't recognize that either.
Yeah. Okay.
It,
Yeah, because
it makes sense somehow intuitively though. Like,
Sure.
I don't know. Like some of it, like there's like a dialectic nature of it where like earth and sky together form like the jug, like those
Hmm.
things together, or like
yes.
he uses the word stays. So like earth and sky stay, like sky through sun stay into wine. Like it's these things can come together to manifest something
Yeah.
else. So,
Mm,
and then the fourfold thing is just like I see it like on like a field, like
yeah.
XY axis, XY axis, and like those two dialectics are happening at once. I mean, this is like self-organizing principles. So as they are
Hmm.
both happening and like emerging, but they're also doing it together, you're getting this like spiral dynamic thing of just being. This is what
Uh,
I don't know. It's so hard to talk about this stuff too. I
Mhm.
find.
Yeah, actually,
And
it's interesting that you mentioned the spiral like dynamic. To me, like I'm getting like a picture through that like 2D space, or like like now if you like do that and like kind of add a third dimension to it instead of
Yeah.
that 2D, is now you kind of are like spiraling like through these things and they're like kind of like additively, but they can kind of like change. Like I don't know. I guess I'm like in tune with waves, so I'm imagining like the wave like changing phase and how that's like interacting with the different like quadrants, kind
Yes.
of in that space.
Yes.
Hmm.
Which the thingness, like, so the worlding part, like that's where, let me see if I can find the worlding. Mirror play of the simple one-fold of earth and sky, divinities and mortals. So that's the four-fold mirroring we call the world. And then only what conjoins itself out of world becomes a thing. So it has to have like this earth, sky, divine, mortal interaction, fourfold oneness for something to be a thing.
yeah, and also that making intention, like the containment of void thing he's talking about, that
Yeah.
was lost with the objective view, like privileging the scientific over, and that being the all-encompassing thing rather than the intentionality of
Interesting.
thinging a thing,
Yeah.
making it constituently a thing like that. There's another engine in there that like is another view on it, and without these pressures, exerting thingness, it dissipates. It's or whatever, I guess. He gets into that some, like how the thingness retains its thingness.
Regardless of like the strict imposition of like certain like scientific reality, like an objective point of view. I guess like I'm trying to really, I'm thinking about it because the void is like, it can't be disentangled from the vase inherently.
Yeah.
It's just that science now says, oh, the vase is filled with air, but it need not be filled with air. Like it could exist without that air. Both and, right? Yeah.
Well, so that's interesting. Could it exist with it? Like, I don't know if this is like something about concept, right? That like there is something in the process of thinging that brings forth, you know, I don't know. He gets into some of this. I don't know. I'm getting off into off the text here.
Well, I think
that's okay.
Yeah, that is okay. I think for me, at times I was trying to figure out what the difference between thingness and objectness was. Like he made kind of a distinction between the two, and I was trying to figure out, you know, what makes a thing versus a thing an object, and is it like a thing is an object when it becomes like something in the physical world, like this like mouse or like this like pen.
Yeah.
Like this is now an object, but this is also a thing outside of its objectness.
Well, an object fails to bring into the picture the divinity of things. So science lacks divinity, so it lacks a thingness, like the content of science, like I guess, which is interesting. Like, so science is not a thing, which is kind of funny. Just as a statement, I don't know if that would fly with, or like,
no, I think that the practice of science is a thing because it has a devotional quantity. But that's, I mean, but the thingness of science, the like, is in that, right? Like it's in
the process.
It is. Well, the relationship with the type of thing that could like gather void, right? Like there are processes that have a sensitivity to that. Magic, like versus object. So the object nature of of an object comes from the observable, right? The ability to stand back and see, and
it's defined by an absence of divine, I think. Like it's measurable, it's like specific in a way, right?
Can you like elaborate a little bit on divine? Like I think I understand what you're saying. I'm just like trying to get like your conception of divinity and
actually it's funny. I've been wanting to like research the word divine and look up the definition of it, but so like science and objectivity, it means it can be reproducible, repeatable, measurable, like that it's like there's like a consistency to it, in that you can see it, it's objectified, whereas I think that divine is potentially more subjective. It's difficult to abstract it in order to talk about it. It's more of a felt sense. Yeah, there's something here. Yeah, I'm just looking at, there's a part about objects where the thingness of the thing remains concealed or forgotten. Yeah, which there, like, if you forget about the divinity, if you forget about the spirit of the thing, the aliveness of the thing, then its thingness is concealed. So like divinity is like a magic word. It's like God. I don't know. I don't know if either of you have definitions, working definitions for that.
It's tied to
divinity.
sacred and sacredness. So like taking an object and feeling into the fullness of its relationship to all that came before and all that makes it in pressure and sensitivity and oneness with the web of the place that it came from, and understanding through that, like upward into infinity, right? Like that feeling versus like it's like 3 inches wide by 4 inches tall. Like, you know, there's those are different sensibilities. And the orientation towards that can be a divine sensibility that is culturally mediated, and you know, there's all these kinds of things. But without that, it is just matter. And with that, if you then
it's inert in a way, then
this is how you end up with nihilism. Like if you lose track of the divinity, the thingingness of the world, you just see things as object, matter, material, including yourself and your self-perception, which means that inherently it is empty and meaninglessness. Because it is just this stuff that you can see, not the boiling, moving, you know, aliveness.
There's something about movement and life here. And in other Heideggerian texts, like I've not read too much of his work, but the question concerning technology, we should definitely read that one.
Yeah, I actually wanted to read it before this. I just didn't get a chance to.
Yeah, it's like that one even more so than this one, because like part of like what, and we just spent a bunch of time with John talking about Buzzard, and we recorded some of the conversation, so we're excited to share it with you. Yeah, we're like CJ, like I think it's recorded. We're like CJ's gonna geek out on this.
Sweet.
But the movement, like, so there's a movement to what we're trying to express. There's like an aliveness to what we're trying to connect, like through a relational operating system, like what the relationships are. It's like more alive, living. But what's hard, and what the question concerning technology in Heidegger's perspective, the challenge is that technology in how it works is more scientific, it's more objective, right?
Yeah.
And so it's less alive, and it reduces things to this like sort of standardized way of being that it makes it hard to put them together. So like my shorthand for all of this is tech versus art. So tech is this like sort of inert standardized thing. He uses the term standing reserve, which is the standardization of things so that they can be ordered and you can pull them off a shelf and it's all very organized and like you can program it. So, and it needs to be precise. It needs to be exactly like thus, so that you can grab what you need when you need to grab it, and you know, you can program the whole thing. Whereas that when you do that, and like he gets into it in the very beginning, it feels like things are close, but they are not near, because you are not understanding the life behind it, which is what is nearness. Like, and this is where when you stack and smack it all together with the fourfold mirroring, it's all in one, and that is thingness. That is like, but it's so tech and art, where art is sort of the antidote to it, this like ultimate creativity. It's less structured, it's flowing, it's moving, but there's a way to marry these things, and that's what we're interested in with Buzzard, I think, because you can constrain or create tools to like sense or feel out into what is moving and be able to channel it and connect it and talk about it in a way that is easier than I don't know, dancing around it.
Yeah, and like, I guess like even like it's required to be able to move through it in this like more fluid way. Otherwise it was like it would just be that like static, very objective like view, and like inherently like there's not that much interesting. So the more like fluidity there is, and creating tools to explore through that like more fluid dimension is like super
Yep.
super relevant.
I mean,
Yeah,
this
and
it's like
the
quantum stuff too, is what it feels like. We're like taking snapshots of things where
the snapshots are the object like
yes,
representation of flow.
yes,
Mm.
So you're not throwing out objective reality. Like
no,
there is a tendency to want to do this in like psychedelic circles and all this other stuff. Like the objective reality is just a facet, and it is a method of seeing reality, but it is not the
the
whole of
only yes,
reality.
yep.
And so there is a movement through what is a more fluid, like dynamic reality, right? The
Mm.
whole of the sensorium, basically. Uh, and the objective has a relationship to that in some way, right? I don't mile markers or boundary building or who knows? I don't know.
It's almost like the felt sense that I get is the objectiveness is like kind of what you're saying, like this snapshot in time or a snapshot in whatever, maybe time is, it's just another dimension. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just a snapshot, but what is behind everything there is more than just what it is there itself. Like even in the conscious reality, I guess I'm thinking like there's this level of perception, but there's so much more that's going on that's also not just this perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that feed into it and that stem off from it or can be held at the same time as it. Yeah, but you have to approximate the you have to like objectify, like there's this, I mean, this is what technology does, is it's abstracting some like experience so that we can use it, because otherwise, like David, like we were talking earlier, I forget how this came up, but
the knowledge, labor, consciousness mining stuff.
Well, just putting form to something, it concretizes things so you can work with it more, so that it's not just like a flowing, dancing, like energetic, like, which is nice, like that's fine, like there's aspects of it, but in order to fully like understand and communicate and collaborate, I think there's a need to use tech. I mean, this is why humans and technology are like one in the same. Like you can't have technology, human technology, without the humans. It's not like these things stand on their own. Like we are it is us. Like there's a relationship there, and we use it so that we can better understand each other in the world.
Yeah. I think like I'm kind of it is like that whole like balance thing is in trying to communicate, you do need to like kind of standardize on some method of communication. Like if we all spoke different languages, it wouldn't make any sense. Like language itself is a standard way of thinking, and like we often talk about like building language and like figuring out like, you know, having that shared language. Without it, like it would be very hard for us to like actually communicate ideas, and like that is part of the form in some like level.
Yeah, this came up earlier. I don't. Yeah.
Alphabeting. So like having an agreed upon system of communication that, I mean, that spreads itself and can, you know, be learned and taught and then affords like deeper understanding and coordination, right? That needs to be also in alignment with sort of some larger purpose, like you know, where did languages pop up from? They usually come from the need to sense into the world in some way, right? I don't have a full understanding of that, but it seems right. So like the building a symbology to be able to operate in the world in relation to each other. Like there's an art to that. Like, so the way that information is stored or processed or containerized or not, right? This is back to the jugging, the thinging, right? Some things are functional and they can be informationally functional, symbolic, or, you know, they can, by their nature, process something or store something, right? So like you create the letter A, and that has like a signature that can be built upon modularly in this whole system or whatever, right? Like, or, you know, in the case of things that like we are able to make now, they can be active as device in primitive, right? So like rather than just being an inert like symbol that you can hang logics on, it can be an activated symbol for which communication can work through, or processing can happen, or, you know, retrievable storage or whatever. Anyway, so this is how like the sort of languaging as code sort of mentality comes into this kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know if that made any goddamn sense. Whatever. Yeah.
I mean, languaging as code really got me there for a sec.
Yeah.
I think in the sense, I mean, well, and I think probably a few senses, like language itself is like very code-like.
Yeah.
But also, despite having shared language, the language is not the same between us even. Like we all have slightly different perspectives on things, and like I guess like what I wonder is like we can all query from different angles, but ultimately be asking the same question. Like they may not be exactly like precisely defined as language as the same question, but they all are intuitively getting at the same thing. And like we were able to like basically fill that gap in our own heads because of that shared language, but the language itself is not exact.
It doesn't need to be. The better it is at not being precise. I mean, so certain things like English as a language offers a specificity that lends itself to technicalities, right? And then like say that French doesn't, or, you know, Italian, but those have descriptive power for relationshiping that the English language has to create sort of clunky abstractions to get at. There's still poetry available in all of them, but there are different flavors of that kind of thing. So like, yeah, I don't know why that came up specifically, but yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting to think of language and words. I mean, this is where it's not an article, the piece, what do you call something Heidegger wrote? It's like what?
Thought birth.
Yeah,
thought birth.
It's just wild. Where he starts talking about communication, right? As a tool, as a technology. And it's interesting too, because it's like I have it right in front of me. Television, which will soon pervade and dominate the whole machinery of communication. And I'm just like, it's so weird. Like he didn't see the internet coming, because like, why would he? Like, when was this written? In like the early 1900s? Like, okay. That's just wild. But communication, as in like the transmission of image, sure, but also like one of the most like meaty parts of it is language, right? Being able to share language across distance. So words and language as a tool, as technology, that the same concepts as like the jug apply to language then. So like language as a thing, like what makes language a thing?
Yeah.
So even like making up words, making up a programming language, figuring out a relational operating system. Like, how do you know it's a thing? Like so then you can play that out. So it has to have this fourfold mirroring, this fourfold oneness. But there's another translation that has to happen here, because I don't like earth and sky. Like,
Yeah.
How do you think about, like, I don't know how to think about that in the sense of,
I mean, you can use sort of a Chinese perspective where like earth is sort of the grounded objective,
that's what went through
natural,
my mind too.
right?
Yeah.
And then sky is the transcendent and above and beyond, right? And if it doesn't contain these, then it doesn't contain reference to or relationship with these
Both. Yeah.
all of these entities and their intertwinedness, then it's not an engine that will be sustainable.
Yeah, it's like earth and sky almost speaks to, again, it's like entanglement stuff, quantum entanglement stuff, where it's both things at once, but it's hard to like hold the thought of both of them at the same time as one. So in the sense of earth,
that's the thingness.
well, in the sense of, because that in and of itself is a transcendent dialectic thing. The word thing, stop using the word thing. So earth and sky, earth is something that has been made manifest, is concrete, is like you ground into it. It's in some ways finite, and then sky is infinite. It's expanding, like it's growing, like there's no bound to it, kind of. But holding those two things at the same time, I mean, that's a rough, like, that's crazy.
Well, this is where you have to build scaffolding between those things, and that's why you get churches and thinking and processing, and the whole institution or practice and science of knowing and tooling to know better, or know with more clarity, or know with more artistry. The artistry part of this has fallen out of favor in favor of sort of preciseness, or like competitive strength and power and these kinds of things. So market forces.
It's funny, like the earth and I think talking about like the market forces and like all of that, and how that's like become more in favor is, it's funny how related just the earth and sky concepts themselves are related to the same thing that we're talking about earlier, is like the tech versus art. Like it's kind of almost one in the same like dynamic, but we're kind of approaching it from different perspectives to get there. But I think they like, while talking about the earth and sky, I was like, wow, this is very resonant with the same thing, that groundedness, almost objectiveness, versus the divinity and like skyness.
Mortals. It's the same on the same. So the fourfold: earth, sky, mortal, divine. So
mortal, divine, those are the other two, is mortal and divine.
Here's another one with the.
So it's form and formless too. Like the mortals have taken the form of divine on earth, whereas they're in the sky, like that kind of archetypal, like archetype made manifest. Yeah,
and then in relation to some of the stuff we're doing, there is the standard to the bespoke. Like effectively,
how can you afford both at the same time? That's
standard to unique, and in like in either polarity by itself rips itself to shreds. It doesn't work, right? Like
because the bespoke thing is what CJ was talking about, where everybody has their own language, and then it's just cacophony. Like, how are you supposed to
there's no coordination possible.
Is there a story like this in the Bible where everyone's speaking different?
The Tower of Babel.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Tower of Babel.
And they just build a tower, right? higher and higher and higher?
Yeah, it's the informational like overwhelm, and then this is like where babbling comes from. Oh, you're just babbling away. And then you have the term Babel Fish, which is like a a universal translator. Yeah, it's a fish that you put in your ear.
Yeah,
and just tells you what's up.
Tells you what's up.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting too, because in the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, they're trying to bridge between earth and sky, mortal and divine, right?
Yeah.
That's like, and this is the story of Icarus getting too close to the sun. Like it's.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of this in the like sort of social media towers that we're building, right? They are.
But they're like the opposite.
They're idols to communication, effectively, right? They're
idols
the most
to technology. Yes.
Yeah, like they aren't the actual form of what we can be. They're just an abstraction from like a particular shiny quantity of what we can be, and the overemphasis on these things is like you get the sort of babble problem, the gibberish problem. Like we've got billions of people yammering at each other, with the like simplest grammar possible. Like it's barely coherent.
Like not.
Like what?
What happened?
Well, I sorry, I was trying to figure out like what you mean, like in the simplest way possible, in the sense like it's a like or it's not
a like or not. Yeah, it's a completely binary. It's measurable, like, and it's like you can measure a shitload of it because there's like a bunch of atomized interactions, and it's the same model as like trying to understand the fullness of a rat by giving it a lever to push. Like, okay, you'll understand one piece of potential behavior within a larger context.
Yep.
But and that's fine. But like, so this is like the level of sophistication for which these things are operating. Now there's a lot more. Obviously, they've got the AIs basically doing reverse pattern analysis to like offer preferential like information, but based on like just a really like effectively sort of objective reality,
and
like,
quite shallow too.
Yeah, because it's meant to work on the lack of thingness, but selling the possibility of thingness, that desire for thingness in a lot of ways, right? But all you get in return is object. So there's just a constant desire and want that can never be fulfilled by these engines.
Like this kind of points to when he's talking about the atomic bomb.
Actually, I didn't get that part at all.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, well, part of this, it came up a couple times. I want to see it the second time. I think
some understanding of what he's saying.
Yeah, I think it's the thing you're talking about right now, Dave, because it comes up again. So in the beginning, it comes up as man stares at what the explosion of the atomic bomb could bring with it.
Yeah.
He does not see that the atomic bomb and its explosion are the mere final emission of what has long since taken place, has already happened.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But then later, science's knowledge, which is compelling within its own sphere, the sphere of objects, already had annihilated things as things long before the atomic bomb exploded. The bomb's explosion is only the grossest of all gross confirmations of the long since accomplished annihilation of the thing. The confirmation that the thing as a thing remains nil. So
annihilation in there and nihilism have a relationship here, even if I just made it up. It's when you take the measure of objective reality to its utmost, like mastery, you effectively boil down everything into its material smallest components.
Yep.
And in this, you'll reach an end of the ability to know, both on the macro and micro, because you have unthinged ultimately into
Everything.
object,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you end up with meaninglessness.
Yes.
Like you end up with
Which is why we have a meaning
nothingness,
crisis.
empty nothingness, no thingness. So that is the empty quality of no thingness.
It's an over objectification in this example, in our current instantiation of the world. Like we've taken the thing out of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, what is the opposite?
Divine quality of thing? Yeah.
I don't know if there's an opposite of transcendent, but it's almost like that. Like we're not.
It's related to the profane,
Hmm.
Sacred and profane. The transcendent is sacred. The profane is whatever.
Yeah.
In relation, there's a word for it.
It just seems like such a strange thing, because the concept of like transcendentalism or the dialectic process, like that, to me, my understanding of that and felt sense of it is that is what drives life, like self-organization. This is how things work effectively. So to deny that or to ignore that, it's not that it's not happening, it's just that you're choosing not to see it or something. This is
it's developmental. So
okay.
There is a quality to understanding the world through its thingness and or through its absolute divinity and animism, right? Those are separate understandings, and the need for objective understanding came out of an over indexing on animism, like with the religion as such, or magic, or God being the divine understanding of the mechanism of world, right?
So we're just swinging.
Yeah, that's
like,
exactly what I was thinking.
Far
Is this
overcorrecting?
Overcorrecting? So it's too swing. We were initially like into like way divine, and like we swung way objective, and now
we need to synthesize them into into discussion, and there are multiple stages in all of these things, right? But like the mentality here is an ability to hold and understand the validity of all of those types of understanding between the objective and divine, right? Like they're every combination and overlap or whatever has some validity, right?
Yep.
And then the ability to not identify directly with any one of those, right? But be able to embeddedly understand them from a perspective of empathy through some kind of practice or whatever. Recognizing the validity and the sacredness of that thing will help in understand, giving you the practice nature around it. But then another move, right? Another move, which is how to skillfully, with this understanding, integrate these things into a way of being that is resonant with the understanding that all this exists, right? Like, we recognize all of this stuff, all of this is valid. Okay, that recognition is just the first step. Then it needs to be enacted in some way. And if this is a true representation of the world, then there will be a conscious response to it, right?
Yes.
The world will rearrange itself in understanding, or we will rearrange ourselves in alignment with the, anyway. So I don't.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, if it's a thing, then people will recognize it as such.
Yeah.
Because the things, I mean, and then you can get into, there's gradient of not thingness, but quality of thingness, right? So a very well-designed chair, for example, like a chair is a thing when it's designed in such a way and it's beautiful, it's described as it's a high quality thing. So like go ahead.
I was just gonna, like, to me, like, I mean, not to take it like too far objective, but like they're like in a high quality chair, like I'm just imagining like so much craftsmanship and you know, like a lot that goes into it that adds like that thingness, and like that's like really what's like, where did that tree come from? And the person who like decided that this is the quality of wood and the grain that I'm looking for in building this chair, and carving and scooping it out in such a way. And like, I guess that is also the thing with like the whole like bespoke versus, you know, like very
manufactured.
Manufactured.
Because a chair is not just a chair, and this is where it is an object, and in that way, object means thing, not objective. So a chair, I mean, there's differences though. Like the chair from IKEA could be more like just an object. It's less a thing versus a chair that was created and
has
loved.
Been, boiled down into almost nothing. Like,
almost nothing.
But so there is if you go back further in that lineage, like say an Eames chair, right?
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking about. Yep.
Like the thingness in that is implicit in the cultural understanding of artistry in using a form like, which is mass manufacturing. Like, what is the most beautiful expression of thingness that can be produced in this new medium, right? And there is still an experimentation and a liveliness to this that can be sensed through this new layer of communication that we've developed in technology. But like, you continue to mine that thing, and it's like a gross representation further removed from the source until you get something that is like facsimile of an idea. You know, it's like a JPEG that's been processed a billion times. But maybe that sense of something later on becomes important because it's a token of reality or whatever, right? But you know, this is lineage, and this is the interpretive sense, like this part of it, like the storytelling, the narrative, the relationing to object and how it can be done, and what is suitable to like I guess, I don't know, a healthful relationship to object. I don't know.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to the fourfold thing. The fourfold thing. This using the word thing for everything is really crazy. Like, I'm catching myself all the time.
Yeah. It's like you have a new perception on the word thing.
Isn't this how we got here in the first place? Because Dave calls everything a thing, and he was talking about thingness, and Cedar's like, wait, what's happening? What is a thing?
I mean, it was the thingness that really got me, because I'm like, oh man, like, and maybe it was interesting because I think I was initially thinking like of the thing as more an object.
Me too, actually.
Than an actual thing in the sense of this like fourfold oneness thing.
Yeah, it's a
sense.
It's a beefier, deeper
beef
thingness. Yeah, beef thing.
So what I was gonna say is the fourfold oneness, the specific choice of, or is it even a choice? The identification of earth and sky, divine and mortal, like the potency of those two continuums, or whatever that is, like how Heidegger arrived at succinctly seeing and being able to use this. I mean, is it an example? Is it a metaphor? Like, I'm curious about that aspect of it too, because that's not the only fourfold oneness, is it?
No.
Is it just like a super potent one that is applicable broadly? I'm just, this is one of those.
Yeah, there are probably, I mean, this is like the Kabbalic view, or, you can build lensing on reality that understands the flow and, tension, and, you think about it in a bunch of different relational mentality, psychology, like all of these things, right? Like it is sensing into the sort of structures of consciousness,
of being. I'm like,
Yeah, and then
so
down
I'm
into
wondering,
being.
could you make up another fourfold oneness? Probably that it wouldn't work as well, but I'm
Like,
just
so trying
curious.
to produce one of those, like, because it is a sort of master knowledge work.
Yeah, I'm trying to reverse engineer how he got. How do
Yeah.
you know that it's earth, sky, divine, mortal? Yep, there it is. Boom. Like that's a thing,
So
right?
you work your way towards it.
Mm.
So like McLuhan has like his tetrad of understanding media, and it's like, you know, a media, he has like their laws effectively.
Well, he defined
And
the term media too, didn't he?
yeah, because he what he's doing is he's feeling into, or my understanding of what they're doing, from doing like a baby version of this, is there is the sensitivity that there is structure to the world in some way. And that structure can be mechanical, it can be dynamic, fluid, it can be systems, it can be religious, it can be relational, whatever. There are structures for these things. And what seems to be true, what we have learned as a species, is to be able to interpret the structure of these things, you need devices and tools and ways of seeing and ways of interacting with media effectively, right? Stratum, whatever. And so if that's the case and you have a sensitivity for a thing that you can't like find written down yet, right?
Yep.
You have to start from where current knowledge is
Yep.
in the areas that you are looking into,
And build
start
from
building
there.
bridges.
Yep.
And those bridges can take the form of conversation with people who have adjacent understandings. And this works best when there's like, you know, a certain mentality around it. Like you can't really have a big ego about these things because it's impossible. You have to know so much about everything. So writing basically logics so that you like, and creating grammar structures and language to feel out into something that you have an instinct is there. And sometimes you'll find like a particularly useful like piece of pipe or you know, like a little device, you know, like in a concept, and you can rely on that to continuously see this part of reality, right? So you're just building these little, I mean, this is a sort of mechanistic view of it. Like there are probably flow-based views, there's, you know, electric view, you know, all kinds of different
You
things,
could
right?
describe this, the same thing that you're talking about now with a different set, a language set.
But it's tooling though. I do see it as that. Like and he has an interest in technology. So there is a technical, like a fundamental technical understanding to the way that he is creating device to be able to like lens the world, right?
It's so crazy to read this stuff for me. I'm just like what is like it feels like something. It's just so like it's and this when you don't understand, you're like, what is it that I don't understand? Because there's something here, like you can feel the gravity of it pulling. It's like asking to be understood.
That's the nature of these like devices. They are like, they just suck you in because like there's a if not a truth, then the possibility of understanding by running through the like through the lens, like doing the practice of building the lens so as to see it, like because they are there's an interactive quality to this. Like you need to conform your perception to what he's created, so that you can see through it to verify or whatever that anything can be seen through that lens. So you like then look out into the horizon of what you know.
Back.
I just realized that I knew about this piece specifically because I took a course online, and there's a lecture, I think Johannes Niederhauser, there's a lecture about this that he I don't know that I can pull the lecture itself out, but he did write
because it was like
something. It's like in like a system, but he wrote
Yeah.
up the lecture too, so it's transcribed.
Transcoded. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really cool to like read, like it almost makes me want to read like other people have written on.
Yeah.
So this is
the
why I thought of
thing.
Johannes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's a philosopher academic who's not in academia anymore. He's living outside of it, working outside of it, but he studied Heidegger. So
I see.
Yeah.
Like
and
he's got like a really
speaks
view
like
on
German,
the lens.
and yes, like so his like he spends time, like it would be interesting to talk with someone like Johannes or any philosopher about just the nature of these philosophical texts and the weight of them and the understanding of them, especially because if you've spent a lot of time studying not only the content but the structure,
the context,
yeah, the history of it, and you know, you have a better sense of like the full picture, like we were talking about, for where
building
this fits.
the context of the human almost a little bit.
Yeah. Hearing someone with that understanding talk about what it means to them, and I mean, you get snippets of it through a lot of the YouTube videos that these kind of people
Yeah,
put
you
out.
do.
Because they get into little things where they're just like, whoa, like, are you feeling that? And they're like, yeah, I'm feeling that. It's big, it's crazy, like that's wild. And then the same thing where, how did he arrive at the fourfold? But when you get people that are trained in this and have been thinking about this, their description is equally as interesting.
Yeah, the one thing that I miss in a lot of this is the like sort of application aspect of these things, because they're tooling.
Yes.
Like they are, you know, you're able to use them in relation to device of your own, right? Like,
yes.
Or understanding how devices could even be manufactured or thought about, or any of these kinds of things. So, but part of that is understanding the tooling at all, like how it's put together, how to use it, how to think through it. And this stuff is so damn complex that like it's so much easier when you have other people to model like how they see it, like through it. It goes so much faster. Yeah.
I mean, even having this conversation, if I wasn't able to, like, I would have just been stuck. Like, I didn't really know where we were going to start or begin with this thing, because I was looking at it, I'm like, I have some sense of what's going on, but the actual, it wasn't like, you know, it's kind of funny you mentioned like you can sense that there's like something like very important here, and you catch glimpses of it. You read that and you're like, this resonates.
Yeah.
But why does it resonate? And then putting that in context with the rest of the piece is quite difficult. And that's why like going through this conversation, it's like almost like rereading it a second time would give like a different shift of the lens that you come in with versus the lens like
there's one part towards the beginning. What about nearness? How can we come to know its nature? Nearness, it seems, cannot be encountered directly. We succeed in reaching it rather by attending to what is near. Which, like, so we find nearness by attending to which is near. That in and of itself, like all these things are like, they're koans. Like you can't understand them on face value. But that concept has come up a few times. Like for me, it comes up often. Like I understand things better. I call it triangulation. And you can't figure out what something is directly. Like it's better if you've got like this text, so pull in another Heidegger text and then form your own understanding, and then like start and you're just like, okay, it's starting to come to light. Talk about it, write about it, like do more than one thing with it so the thing can come alive, because it's really hard to look. You can't look at the text, it doesn't work. If you try to read the text as object, which I've done with some of this stuff, and there's someone else, who was it that I was reading, was writing about this. The way to experience it is by letting it like wash over you.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a weird way of doing this, but if you do that with more than one piece, it starts making sense more. I don't know why. There's something about like you can't do it head on, but
I think it's
You're
the same
sort
thing
of- yeah. Good.
I was just gonna say like to me it seems like the same thing of just like building context. If it's something that's like completely new, it's hard to look at that thing and embrace and see the thing in its entirety. Is you don't understand the
well, you don't know what
possibility
it is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're saying with triangulation, there's nothing to triangulate with, like how this fits into anything. It's kind of just floating there amorphously until you start bringing in those other relationships. And I think we kind of probably talked about that as a little bit, is like when you bring a new piece of content in, at least I talked with this about John, is like initially it is kind of amorphous, but eventually like you do relate it, and like now that's starting to form this like bigger picture and thingness. Like initially it maybe is kind of objective. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a parallax view or a stereoscopic view to this, like where you have 2 points of view and it gives it a depth, and then you can sort of see around it, but like expand that out into a gazillion sensors, right, and points of view with like perspective, right, and then the enmeshment points around that to be able to see reality. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, bringing things near through triangulation. What's a better term for that? But that's partially what a relational OS should do.
Yeah.
Help bring things near for the person who is experiencing it. So this is partially where you're in the driver's seat, where you can pick what to triangulate with. You're creating your own context based on what other people have put into the system for their own purposes of understanding, their own triangulation. And then so this is where we were talking earlier, John, Dave, and I said, I think the next game that we should do, because we've talked a lot about removing identity from a software system as the primary mode of like identification within the system. And it's more about the idea or the content that you're trying to give, like let that shine. It doesn't matter that I posted it first and that you, CJ, commented on it. I mean, it is important for other reasons, but we're kind of in service of the idea or whatever it is that we are trying to understand or unearth. And yeah, so
interesting. Yeah,
like John was saying, you can kind of tell who wrote what posts because we were all very much doing our own thing. But what if we tried to what if we focused on one idea or one like area, and then we all contributed to that area, like on a shared canvas or something? So it doesn't matter who shares what, it's more about what we're sharing. So in a way to get at that would be to focus on one topic or area.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to see like what kind of medium we would take for that. I think John shared the fig jam thing.
Yeah,
I haven't had a chance to look at anything from yesterday, and including that. But like, you know, does something like that work for kind of building like some? It's like, does it end up just being a markdown document, or is it this like more like amorphous kind of like
probably
idea
canvas,
exploration?
I think.
Yeah, canvas makes sense to me.
So then you could do whatever you want. You can drop an image in there. You could drop a doodle. You could drop, I guess you could potentially drop an audio file or a video file, but giving more room to put whatever you want in there, whatever comes up.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that would be a pretty good game. I think it also like what idea we focus on would be, I guess, in the end, it doesn't really matter. Like it could be something as simple as like the thing here, like we just had like one thing to focus on, and we started doing that initially a little bit too. And even Blog Club was kind of similar, where we had like something to focus on. And then the ideas from there kind of became, it would always start with one thing and kind of like bubble out. So now it's thinking like, how do we really take that thing and dive in a little bit more deep, instead of like, it's easy to go breadth first because there's so many ideas everywhere and all of them are very interesting, but it's almost like taking all those interesting ideas and reconstraining it back to the original concept, or whatever that idea, in service of the idea. I think you mentioned, Kristen, is very, very like interesting wording, and like makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's a macro game dynamic where if this play works, like where you go in there and you have a group of people or groups of people like filling out these things, there's like a sort of, you could add scarcity over a season to them and have like sort of energy put into like sort of doing practice around filling in these kinds of things. So yeah, I think with that in mind, like so yeah, I don't know, you just open a canvas, put a phrase in there, and then like over some period of time, is it just async, like you're doing rounds, you're checking in to see if anybody has done anything, and then you're bouncing around, like?
Yeah, I think it's completely async. You just time box it and people know it's there, and you can drop in when you want to. And if you end up being sync at the same time as someone, that's fine. And you could choose to pick up the phone or jump on a Zoom if you wanted to. Like, that's your prerogative, or have a sidebar. There's no, like, I think in that regard, there's no rules for how to communicate about it. I think
feels like it's missing a forcing, or not a forcing function. Okay, so yeah, some constraint in this to like, because like maybe I'm just a laggard on this style. Like I would need to see you guys doing some stuff, and then I'd feel guilty for not doing it or something like that. Like maybe I'm missing something in the style of interaction in this one.
I think we should experiment with this because it seemed like super salient earlier when we were talking about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the bounds of the experiment.
Yeah, I think it's like a loose game. It's like an interim game or something, just to feel out what doesn't feel right and what might be missing. But we haven't done anything focused yet, like like content wise. Like, let's talk about this thing and see what happens when you ask a group of people to sort of circle.
Yep. Maybe that's, I just don't like to be focused. So it's probably that.
It's hard for me too.
But you don't have to be once, like, so in the example.
I get it. I'm feeling into what the like
resistance is.
Or a shakiness around understanding, I guess, because I mean maybe that comes out in resistance.
There's no wrong answer is part of what happens.
Sure. So, I get that.
You could start with like, so the term that I gave as an example is this concept of stigmergy that I can't stop talking about. And if you just started with that word at the center of the canvas, you could go look it up and be like, oh, this reminds me of something else. And then just you're off there. Okay. Yeah. You don't ever go back to that root word because you don't want, like, no one, like, you didn't, that's not doing it wrong. Because then someone else who's like, yeah, this concept and like the notes around it doesn't really resonate with me, but that offshoot does. So I can understand, this is another triangulation thing. I can understand what stigmergy is by dint of understanding this offshoot that Dave went down, because that made more sense to him. That lens on it, it's more sensible to me.
So even then, it's like pretty free form in the sense, like it's just a root to begin with, and then like seeing what branches and emerges from the root. It's not necessarily like it is centered in that way, but it's still quite exploratory.
Yeah, and I think like the term that we thought might be interesting to start with is cartography, because the concept of mapping kept coming up. So
map making,
maybe the constraint is we're trying to understand the role. Like we have to pose a question. It's like a prompt. We're trying to understand, we're like asking the universe. We are trying to understand, it's like divination. What role cartography plays in Buzzard or in relational operating systems. Like we pose a question that resonates with all of us, and then we use that as the frame that we go out to explore, so that you can always sort of return back to, is this answering the question?
It's a hyper conversation practice. So like who knows how we'll choose the topic areas for these kinds of things. I mean, that's a practice that can continue if this thing is fun. There's an artistry to doing that. And it's probably in relationship to directional movement of the community, you know, like there's some understanding of the types of things that we're all probably pretty interested in and want to play around. And then in the act of doing one of these things, you get information about what we're all thinking about, and there's probably overlapping directional data there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Well, you can do multiple passes at this too. So someone later can come through and curate. And this is like, this is where you can create different contexts based on perspective. These things over here are a thing, this stuff over here is a thing. But I don't know how I got on that.
I'm not sure either, but it is reminding me, I guess, like I'm thinking
triangulation and like
triangulation.
You can't reach what you're trying to get to by going directly to it. So the nearness thing, you can't attend to nearness by going at it. Reaching it, you have to attend to what is near.
It's a very flowy kind of thing. Nearness reminds me a lot of like a flow.
Yes, because nearness in the Heideggerian sense here for me feels like the art version, but it's obscured by objectivity. It can be. So that's where in the very beginning, when he talks about the communication technology and tools, they are bringing things not near, but close.
Yeah.
So you are he gets into concealing, revealing in the question concerning technology also, which is, we'll read that piece next together. But
definitely,
when you bring things close and there's no distance between you and it, like information, technology does this. It's getting closer and closer. We're going to embed shit in our brains. Okay, fine. But when you do that, like in an objective manner, what is being concealed? The flow, the movement, the artistic stuff that can't be like, it just can't be reduced. Like you could take a snapshot of it, but it's still a reduction of the thing. It's an abstraction away from the thing itself. And you can't have technology without the art too. They have to go together. Otherwise, this is back to what we were talking about, like Dave was talking about. We're honing ourselves towards this. It's too technical, too much tech, too much of objectivity, and you lose all of the divinity, you lose all of the dance of it, and you get a machine. We don't want like just a machine. We want the machine in relationship to the flow. This is the human computer relationship. We can work together with technology. Like that's the name of the game. That's what we're trying to do.
That is the relationship that we want with technology is for the benefit. Well, I don't want to say for the both of us, but like in the sense like we do want it to benefit us, make our lives better, but
mutual existence.
What is mutual existence? And like
it's what a good relationship is.
Mutually beneficial.
Yes. So then you can, I mean, this like part of what I'm thinking about here is there's no reason to necessarily fear technology. It's because like generalized AI being able to, we're just, I mean, I don't study this, but my sense is we are so far from a machine being able to take over everything and be unstoppable. So sure, we can put that out into the world that we are terrified of that thing. And then if we do that and we are just always designing to avoid that, we're going to build the thing that does that. So instead, like, why don't we form a like befriend it instead of creating like a fence around, we don't want it. Because if you build a fence around, we don't want it to do that, all the technology is going to try to do is figure out what is behind the fence, because you're teaching it to be inquisitive and do like, what am I not supposed to do? Oh, that seems fun. It's like a kid. Yeah. I mean, I'm giving life to the tech that it could sense that out, which
it's, I mean,
we're
who's to say if it's not possible? Like that is I feel what you're saying, you know, like it makes sense.
Well, take the animistic view of, like, so if we have sort of mastered the objective, we can de-thing things into nothing, no thing. And we have set aside the understandings of divinity, right? Then it means that the objects that we are making, like what Kristen was just, I just lost it. Kristen, what were you just talking about?
If you, it's the equivalent of a parent and child.
Yes, the parenting thing.
Don't say what I say, don't do what I do. And the kid's like, what the fuck else am I supposed to do? So if you do this with technology, like there's a similar, because you were trying, like with technology, we were trying to grow it and raise it in the same way that we, you know, that's parent, what, child.
Exactly. So that's where I was leading with this. But and if you have a parenting relationship with a child that is like you treat it like an object.
Yeah.
Right? It's an it. It just has the characteristics of something that cries, and if you feed it certain things, it stops crying, right? Or you have this very like detached relationship with, you know, the kid will have so many deformities mentally, like it'll just be broken. Like, so if what we're talking about is machines learning and having primordial intelligences, then the method of doing the teaching should be pedagogical and understood through what we're good at, which is parenting and, you know, rearing and the art of that kind of thing, which can be translated into, like making machine code with love. Like there is no reason that you can't do that, other than it might feel cheesy because you don't remember how. Like you know how to do it though, like most people with like pets, or you know, like, you know, that's
or anybody that was raised with loving parents.
Yeah, but you know, if you've been
or
around
friends,
a lot,
or like maybe you didn't have loving parents, but then you found it through friendships or other forms of relationship, like it's a nurturing thing.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not a given to think of these things this way because they're objects, you know, like so
they're objects, but
yeah,
when an object turns into a thing, it's not just an object, it's has the fourfold oneness, which
having a close relationship
divinity.
to your things, right? Like he mentioned something like that in there, like like you are having a steward relationship or a caretaker relationship, not a master slave relationship or a human machine relationship, which, you know, it's just a standing artifice and it matters not at all. And like, you know, which is untrue, like, because if you take care of a machine in a loving way, it will continue to work in ways that are smooth. There's a smooth operation. But if you leave it around and you don't tend to it, it will just fucking fall to pieces and it'll break, right? And like, you know, part of there is a relationship to the upkeep of things, and you can expand that out into, you know,
and the use of things too.
Sure, yeah, a reverence. You know, this is the sort of indigenous mindset, like you know, you are an ancestor in possession, you know, only in relationship to what you need from the system and give back and all the, you know, these sorts of sensitivities that I need to study more.
What's coming to mind is when people keep objects and they don't use them.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get rid of it, and they pile up. This whole thing, like this came up last night. We went to a restaurant and one of our neighbors was there, and her parents and Dave's parents both had, what was it? The exercise machines?
Oh, and Nordic Track.
Nordic Track. They don't use them. They don't want to get rid of them. Oh, your parents, my parents too. It's like, what? Like, so this attachment to object, right? And thinking it's a thing without treating it as a thing and treating it more like an object. There's a weight on that.
Yeah.
Because if you're just housing a bunch of objects, which you are not tending to, and there's no life to it, like, it's oppressive. It's hard. It's interesting. We're working with a company called Objet, French for object, and just realizing Kev might like this article because he likes, or this piece, he likes understanding how everything works and how's this doing this, and here's a philosophical piece on your whole company. Because they're trying to help people understand relationship to objects effectively to form a relationship into thingness.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they, like, I don't think they would use that exact language, but they would be like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's a little closer to the ground.
Yeah.
Conceptually. But that's what they're doing, yeah.
Yeah, but Kev has this like broader picture and take on things. Like he wants to talk, like, so I was getting into the meat of matters, like let's talk about like how everything works, like the machinery.
This is how you make
sense of it. Yeah.
Stuff that people need. This is like the entrepreneurial inventor like has this tendency because okay, there's very clearly a way reality is, and there's very clearly missing a mechanism or idea or point of view or, you know, school of thought to be able to interact with that reality. So I guess we got to build it. And how do you build it? You got to figure out how to know how to build it, which means that you got to go fill in all the gaps that you don't know. Yeah. So you can build like a better potato peeler or whatever. That's what Heidegger was saying.
What the world was really missing.
He's like standing reserve. It's for
potato peelers.
Potato peelers.
Oh yeah, this part too. Okay, so there's two things. Thing. CJ brought this up earlier with the chair. So when we were talking about a chair being not an object but a thing. So the jug, clearly the jug stands as a vessel only because it has been brought to a stand. This happened during and happens by means of a process of setting forth, namely by producing the jug. The potter makes the earthen jug out of earth that he has specially chosen and prepared for it. The jug consists of that earth. By virtue of what the jug consists of, it too can stand on the earth, either immediately or through the mediation of table and bench. There's more, let's see. What exists by such producing is what stands on its own. It is self-supporting. When we take the jug as a made vessel, then surely we are apprehending it, so it seems, as a thing and never as a mere object. So just the artistry and the mastery, the craft of making things, the act of creation. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's the processing of divinity in imbuing in that imbuement is a component of thingness.
How you make something is important, is sort of the takeaway for me.
A cathedral versus a track home.
Yep.
like the energy resident in a cathedral that took hundreds of years of dedicated divine construction. Like, and you go into this place and it like sucks you upwards. And then you go into like something that a couple dudes who didn't want to be there banged together in a weekend. You know, it's got a
There's
different
a
sort
different
of,
vibe.
yeah,
It has a different inbuilt energy.
yeah,
Yeah. Same goes with software though. Like if
yeah,
you are
totally.
building software to solve some sort of market need, it's
Yeah.
going to feel like this was something that came up with Ponder. Like if it doesn't have life built into it, it's going to feel like an empty, vacant space. Like there's where you could do stuff in it. Which is why I think in part that we're not just jumping into building software, because we're trying to understand, because we don't know what this thing is. What is the life behind it? Like we can sense into some small pieces of like objectively, this is what it could be. This is how we could program it. We could just go jump into the Web3 stuff, but yeah. And so that then begs the question.
You build the church. Yeah, you build the church before you build the town hall. This is the thing that Jordan Hall talks about.
Yeah.
Like that driving force, the connection to a God point, the understanding that you are operating in terms of the absolute and with like movement there, like this opening stuff. Okay, how do you relate to that? Like first, like that, you know, rather than picking something on the ground and being like, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna get that thing. Okay, that's fine. You get gold out of the ground. There's a way to do that. This thing is like, all right, how do you build a practice of seeing such that
and relating to each other
such that the continuous play of doing this will afford patterns of reality that can be objectified, you know, through the process of seeing, through the process of relating to them, growing and developing like a parent-child relationship into some more complex relationship. That's just the best metaphor we've got so far. Okay, that's a different design process. It's you know, sort of, I think this relates to the like evolutionary cybernetics school. There's like a bunch of stuff related to this kind of thing, like emergent coordination technologies and like communication systems for
Swarm
governance and
intelligence.
decision. Yeah, swarm intelligence, collective intelligence, like sort of design thinking. So it's growing, it's designing with evolutionary constraint versus manufacturing a plan, you know, a design
to
spec.
grow it as big as possible. Yep.
I mean, whatever. That's mechanism. There is learning in that. Like, let's build the biggest fucking bridge. You may not need the biggest bridge. You just need a bridge that works well with the material around you that will last a long time and be easy to maintain, right? Like, you know, so there's that school of thought. And can you grow a bridge? Like, if it came from the ground in a, you know, less, there's some elegance and beauty to that or whatever. And also, can the bridge maintain itself? Can it tell you that it needs maintenance? Like, does it know how it sits in relation? Is it a sensing organ, you know, itself, or any of these kinds of things? So, which has a biological understanding more so.
Biological and physics.
The quantum stuff, the entanglement stuff, and that relational aspect is where the like forefront, I think, of thinking is. Or it keeps popping up as the forefront, and I haven't gotten any. I mean, the closest I've got is through you guys.
Yeah, I think
thermodynamic computing.
Yeah,
thermodynamic computing.
The fucking coolest thing ever.
The cybernetic stuff overlaps with that a ton.
I'll send you an article, CJ.
Was that one of the things that you read? I kind of
That one.
vaguely. I did like skim or like look through those articles I post today. So I
Yep.
remember seeing it. So I was like, I need to actually
Yeah, read that
read
one.
it.
There is someone on Twitter who I'm mutuals with, and she was talking about quantum entanglement. She's a programmer, like it's just blowing her mind kind of thing. And I was like, we had like a little bit of back and forth, and I was like, how about this? And I just gave her the article. And she's like, what the fuck? What is this? Where did this come from? Like, I didn't know this was a thing. And I was like, uh-oh, here we go. I don't know that much about quantum computing. And like I've come across this before though. It's like biological computers basically. And it just, because I come from a bio background, I'm just like, yes, this makes sense to me.
It's like you have the language
those
to,
two things.
Yeah.
Because it gets into like, I studied evolution, and it starts like the article and this line of thinking, it pulls into like how you can look at evolution more broadly and taking into account not just biological principles and a more simplified way of seeing the world, but like layer in physics, and like the thing is on steroids then, because it still can make sense. Like you can use thermodynamics to explain evolution basically, and if there's a way to do that in a scientific manner, that can be programmed.
Yes.
Yes.
You can distill, because physics, like more so than biology, lends itself towards math. But if you can like combine the two, and you're like, all right, so it stands to reason that these things work like this, you can extrapolate that to these mathematical functions, which means you can program a computer to do it, which is crazy. And
interesting. I wonder how similar that is like to existing like AI systems just generally, like, or evolutionary AI systems. This is very interesting though.
Tracks of computing out there. There's like one that's like the mainstream one is not like the biological. So that organization that I pulled from, I specifically mentioned you in speaking about it at some point, CJ, because they're building hardware. So they're going from like the ground up, because the kind of chips that they're using are like almost akin to receptors and like a physical biological sense, which is cool. So their understanding of this is pretty like, I mean, it feels sci-fi.
That's wild. That's wild. That's all part of that same thermodynamic computing article. Oh shit. Okay.
Because the company doing it, they seem earnest too. They have like
this is just their like felt sense of their world, and this is what they're like coming up with.
And they're inviting people to like join in conversation. So even the about page for the organization has a place where you can leave comments, and they're just responding to comments. Like people come there and they're like, this feels really important to me. I wish I could participate or contribute in such a way, but basically like, I don't think I'm smart enough. And then the founder is just like, we appreciate you and think that there's a role for everybody. It's just like really, it's like wholesome.
No
You're
shit.
like, oh yeah, cool.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
Maybe at some point we'll reach out to these guys. They seem cool as hell. And then
I'll put a UI on their quantum computer. Just portals. And nothing is anything, and you try to click something, and then it downloads your consciousness. It's wild.
You exist in
you don't even have to
two
click.
states at once.
Yeah,
one
no clicking.
In the computer, one out here.
No clicking.
If you're near the cursor, you become full thing.
Yes.
I think we have another connection in the quantum computing world. A dude, Coleman Collins, in Chicago. He's one of the twins. Remember that dude?
Yeah.
He works at a
Coleman I know. So yeah.
I think he works at like a quantum computing like startup thing. He does. I mean, I think he like translates the tech and maybe does marketing or something. So he'd be able to.
Which would make it easy to talk to him. He's not like in the weeds, and he's just like, how do I explain this?
Yeah. Anyways, he'd probably talk to us. He's fun to talk to too. Funny guy.
Okay. I actually know I met some dude climbing one time who's also quantum computing,
Yeah.
but he's like really deep in it.
Yeah.
But he was still able to kind of bubble up information to the level that I could understand. Like I was able to probe him effectively.
Mhm.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how far
I
out
might have
these
that.
things are.
The
You have a
actual
sense of
quantum
that?
computers.
Yeah, like anything being sort of usable, like in a pragmatic sense.
I just
I
like
think
that.
it's getting closer.
Well, I think it's like almost at the stage of like vacuum tubes right now. Like we haven't invented the transistor for quantum computers. Is kind of what it appears like to me. It's hard for me to say
still
that that's the right.
theoretical, right?
Well,
Yeah.
no, I mean I would say like theoretical in some sense. Like they have built quantum computers like in the physical world, and they are being used actively. Google had a paper a while back that they claimed quantum supremacy in this one specific task over a classical computer. It's like it was kind of hotly debated. I would have to go back to understand the arguments like specifically. Google has a big quantum computing research team. There's a lot of different competing ways. People are now using different ways of like creating qubits. Like specifically, the one that this guy was talking about was essentially they were doing the double slit experiment on an extremely small scale and using the results from that to build qubits. But they have problems with material science that are like really the fundamental limiting factor there. But it seemed like they were able to do it on a scale, like if they succeed, the scale that they could operate at would be potentially at the level of like transistor scale, from what I understood. But it was a big material science problem, as well as I guess they need like superconducting materials or something like this. I forget.
Interesting.
Or I would have to go back. The company was Psi Quantum, PSI Quantum. So I'd have to go back and like kind of do a little bit more research in them directly. But that was my sense. So I think really from any practical quantum computer, I imagine like, I mean, we are moving faster than back in the day, but 5 years would be absolute minimum. But I would guess 15. I don't know where we are on the acceleration curve is the problem.
Yeah.
It's like I have it like it's really hard to say where we are on that
This
curve.
is where talking to somebody like Coleman might be good, because he probably has the industry mapped, which would, and out into academia probably. I mean, I'm guessing, but it seems like something he'd probably have, which if you can get a hold of the like sort of, this is back to cartography. We're just mapping like where boundary conditions are on certain technologies as like a mechanism to understand where to put effort and where to put sensors on like how to, like what is possible to sort of build into.
Right.
Or that's what I'm doing anyway.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean that seems interesting. It's like revealing parts of the map in a way.
Yeah.
Or maybe on a broader scale than just individuals. I think like maybe that's like it's not easy to explore those parts of the map naturally.
No.
I think it's sensing into overlapping interest.
Yeah.
Like there are natural contours that we're heading towards. Like here we're like, oh, obviously the quantum computing thing is interesting. Kristen has an interest in this like sort of broader view of it. You have an interest in a sort of technical, and I have an interest in a sort of market and like what can you do with it and how close to is it to like play with this stuff, and is there any like useful quantity to operating in this mindset, because it might help us with understanding what we're trying to do, right? Maybe it's a missing piece of like logic. I mean,
it seems like it, at least in like quantum in general, I think it seems very, very related, at least as far as like I can like the sense of it is it's very related. Even in terms of like AI and stuff like this, that I'm very interested in this thermodynamic computing article, because it all seems very, very related, even if it's not specifically quantum related. Like very like,
so what I would want to know from
narrowly.
You is if you read that, and then does this connect to your M1 understanding, and if there is a connection there, like, because if Apple is seeing a movement towards a style of computing or thinking or something, I wonder like if the architecture in the silicon world is reflecting any of this kind of thing, or if it's completely unrelated altogether. I don't know.
So
It can't
interesting
be
kind of,
completely yeah.
I don't think it's completely unrelated, but it actually is kind of, I think they are probably related in some sense. Like I even have like an idea now because of conversations that I've had this week, just of probably with Chiaki, we were talking about just like, or maybe one of her friends, how the brain is just a very efficient like compute architecture, and like how any computer today is like orders of magnitude, like far less power efficient per watt. Like the brain is like 3 or 30 watts or something, whatever it is. It's like no power, and you look at it like an M1, you're like that thing is like crazy slow compared to our brain. And like for a self-driving car, you're like maxing it out, but we're driving, like as we're driving, like this is like taking like nearly none of my processing power. And like that's disregarding vision and like all these other things that are happening in parallel. So it's like, as we move to more biological, like I think like that's really the sense, is like really like power efficiency is becoming like really where it makes sense, because like in a way the brain has optimized more for power efficiency than raw compute performance, but it's gotten both kind of in tandem, and M1 is definitely related to that. And I imagine thermodynamic computing, if they are like operating potentially from a more efficient like circuit point of view for certain kinds of computation, it could be very relevant in the same way.
Cool.
That's my initial sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like the energy seems to be the just zeitgeist of everything, right? Like the compression of it, the storage of it, the production of it, and then the efficient use of it. So that, again, the God point there is, don't boil us alive, everybody. We need efficient batteries or whatever.
I kind of wonder, I need to like learn a little bit more about thermodynamics, because I think thermodynamics is very related to this as well, in terms of like the whole like energy thing and how energy flows exist and happen, all this like that is like seems like a huge part of thermodynamics, but I don't have the true sense of it.
There's probably some relationship to information here too. Like there is currently, like, we are processing information in, like, I don't know, maybe a binary sense is pretty mechanical, or the equivalent of that, like computational in that sense. There is if the qubits are it, or some model of information and energy relationship that is orders of magnitude more effective or efficient or like representative without complexity or complication or something. I don't know. I'm curious if that's, because we may max. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I guess one of the questions I've had for a while that I probably haven't really spoken about too much is, like, when I hear information and energy, I just start thinking about like matter a little bit. Is information, how intertwined are information and matter? And then, because there's obviously a relationship, or at least as far as we know with our best theories, that there is a relationship between energy and matter, right? E equals mc squared is literally defining that in some sense. So then there's like an inherent like energy behind information as well. So it would like be part of some kind of naturalistic flow as well.
This is probably like there's probably some overlap in the like consciousness, like cognitive science stuff in there. Like, like this is back to, we were talking about this before, that like, there's a sort of a sensory experience of consciousness that can be mediated and understood through things like psychology, what you would calling metaphysics before and stuff, but now like religious sensibility and all of these things. And there is a sort of a process of knowledge production that is pulling from the unconscious, the zeitgeist, the collective intelligence or whatever, and then making that into a form that is digestible, right? And so that process has some language and law and science, right? Like it's not just, it can be studied, right? And then that has a relationship. So this is back to the vessel void. That stuff is vessel void. right? And then how does that relate then to the object nature of containment? That overlap. And so this is here's another 4E cognitive science. I don't know what the 4Es are, but like this one is probably related.
Yep.
So another 4 into 1 thing. And the main purpose of 4E cognitive science is addressing this thing. Like, how do you get the philosophy of science and the philosophy of being, like as an ontology, and to talk to each other in, you know, so yeah, you get the sacred back into the scientific. Okay. Yeah, there we go. That was a nice one.
There we go.
We found a 4 into 1.
Yeah.
It just put the question out there.
Yeah. The question gets answered once it's posed.
That's just
May
how
take
it
some
works.
time. May take some time, but if it's out there, then things start answering themselves.
Yeah.
So eventually we'll figure out what is relationship ORS or relational OS. Is the question is now out there. What is it?
Basically. And
so
then
this was the last part that I noted and wanted to come back to. I'm going to quote again because it helps.
Yes.
So, when and in what way do things appear as things? They do not appear by means of human making, but neither do they appear without the vigilance of mortals. The first step towards such vigilance is the step back from the thinking that merely represents, that is, explains, to the thinking that responds and recalls. So the recollection aspect of it is really interesting to me, because there's a fractal here of, we already know what relational OS is. We already know how these things work, but we have to figure out ways of remembering, because there's a fractal at some like very fundamental part of our being. The stuff is happening. It's just way more complicated. Like, there's so many abstractions that are built on top of, but we just have to like find the like basic archetype of the thing. It's there somewhere. And the responding part, I mean, that's relational, right? Step back from the thinking that merely represents to the thinking that responds and recalls. So it should be interactive and based on something that we know within us. You know when you find it too. It feels like a thing.
Yeah, rather than just the objective, like, this is the actual thing.
Like, you found a rock somewhere. You're like, oh, here it is. It's a rock, right? Like, like,
versus
there is
describing what is a rock and where did it come from. And when you can produce whatever that is in it, there's a felt sense of it when it's like, yeah, that's it.
Well, even if you make a story up about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that
story can approximate it though, right? Like, it gives voice to the essence of the rock.
Yeah, essence is where we're getting. So like, the understanding of essence is part of the philosophical approach here. Like, how are you in relation to thing? How are you in relation to object and the spectrum therein, right? Like, you know, this is back to the objet stuff, and then like Marie Kondo, and like, you know, going through and developing a relationship with like your socks. Like, you know, like you're gonna take care of them. You're gonna put them in a drawer in a way that they like to be held, and when they have gone through their use, you will thank your pants and send them, you know, on their way. This kind of thing, which is like a simplistic model, but like speaks to like an altered relationship that takes into account animism and the understanding that like, you can do that, you can practice that and not be a magical thinker, right? You can scientifically understand that this is a relationship that imbues the process of relating to the world with a thingness that is valuable in living in world, right? Like, and you can also thank your pants. Like, you know, you can understand that pants are made from material and that they were manufactured through process, and understanding that plus this animism thing will hopefully make the pants better and the making of future pants.
Yeah.
Like, so because all the way through, if people have a mentality that the material and object that they are imbuing with thingness, then you get cathedral pants.
Yes. Yes, you get cathedral pants, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very like circular nature to this as well, as like the relationship with thing imbues life into the thing, and then since it's imbued with
That's
life,
good.
then you maintain the relationship, and then like you're
Yeah.
like that naturally makes
That is
things.
dynamical systems theory and autopoiesis and self-organization. That's how life works. It keeps going.
So, like, seeking to engage in project in the world with this sensitivity, or the sensitivity that underlies the logic that would make you try to thing the whole of a pipeline, right? Like, this kind of thing is what we're trying to develop, and by enactment, right? And then write it down, like, okay, when you're trying to, because if it works, which I've had some experience of this working in software, like, the team that built the software that we built, like, cared very deeply about its instantiation in the world, and sometimes too deeply, and it blew itself up at points. But like, the outsized effect was like a sort of a personal relationship with customer, with, you know, fan, with, you know, like builder, you know, whatever it was, and using the thing had a felt sense, because it was imbued. And there's a way to do that in every medium.
Yep. I'm just thinking about the live music we saw last night. One of the neighbors in this little community is playing guitar, and after every song, there's like not that many people in this place, he says, "Thank you, fans," and then he kind of like gives a little and he used to perform. Dave was saying, I didn't catch the backstory, in Honduras, and him and his spouse lived there for like 16 years, and I don't know if this is how they made money and like had connections to community, but he performed, and he had somewhat of a following because he played these like quintessential like beach jam sort of thing. So people were there like showing up. So he had fans, and and he was a good performer. Like, he's putting on a whole show. Like, it's like a whole thing. He's a one-man show. So he's imbuing the whole experience, like the whole process, with meaning, because it means something to him. So, and then as the observer, as the person, you're participating then in the show with him, because he's engaging with you and making faces, and you know,
well, you're building the atmosphere together.
Yeah.
And there's an artistry to this. Like, you know, he's a chucklehead. He came and sat with us, and then I'm yelling at him on stage, and then he's giving it back to the room. You know, there is a way to do this that can build vibe, and you know, so there are complex dances of this. You get like big shows, you know, there's all kinds of stuff like this.
Yep.
But yeah, like the act of the ritual and communication, and like the way the information is held, right? That energetic, like, there is something to the quality of that is separate from the object quality, right? And in the difference, that the ability to enable more of that first thing, that first essence, in the process of creating our objects and our tooling and all this other stuff, is all the difference, I think. Like, because if it feels more like the former, then it's nourishing, right?
There's more depth to it, like,
it's more alive too. It's
more
not an
alive.
object, it's a thing. It's got all the things. that things need.
The things.
That's my favorite one. The things. I think that's one of my favorite.
I mean, yeah, it's like a Taoist concept.
Yeah, the thing.
It's a process object, right? Like there is a liveliness in object, process object, right? Like that's
and
how
the
I
whole
was
thing.
describing. Yeah.
Yeah, I see like process object connection like very clearly in the sense like the whole thing of you talking to him before and like him coming over and then now being part of that thing is like the whole thing was a performance and was a process and to build into that.
Yeah. And it is made in its participatory nature. Like it is enacted through play. Like it by being, it bees itself into the world. These model, you know, he has a lot of this stuff.
Bees itself into the world. I think this is a really good quote. The old High German word "thing" means a gathering.
Yeah.
Specifically, a gathering to deliberate on a matter under discussion, a contested matter. We're doing it. We're doing the thing.
We're doing the thing.
I love it. That's great.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I need to eat. I'm just starting.
My
brain is getting a little
really
lost.
all day.
Yeah, I know. I had breakfast and it was a nice big breakfast, but now I'm getting to the point where I should have some food. My brain is starting to go on the downcline.
The downcline. Yeah.
The downcline.
It's a good way to end it.
Good sign.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, that was a great conversation. I'm so glad that we or Kristen, that you recommended this piece and we could have some conversation over it.
Got Heidegger into our system.
Yeah,
Well,
we gotta keep building more Heidegger, right?
We can send it over to the Heidegger nerd contingent and see if
what are they talking about?
See how we did. Yeah. They're like, oh my god,
these guys are way off base. These guys are crazy.
It's
What
fine.
kind of drugs are they on?
Yeah.
Not enough, probably.
Not enough.
Not enough. Yeah. Need some meth or something. I don't know.
That's Heidegger drugs for sure. Meth.
No.
Whoops.
Meth philosopher, Heidegger. Okay. On that note.
Bye.
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 Bye.